So guys, I want to talk about AEW, and I've had a bunch of people talk to me in my comment section when I was saying that Okada should challenge Hangman Adam Page for the AEW Championship. And I want to talk a little bit about that in my video, but I also want to talk about, and this is what the video is about who should be the next challenger for Adam Page at AEW Wrestle Dream. So I do understand the pros and the cons of Okada, that this is an Antonio Inoki tribute show. So, this is almost like with Forbidden Door where you celebrate Japanese wrestling. So it makes sense for Okada to do it. But there are a lot of criticisms that, number one, Okada has 4 belts. No, Okada has 3 belts, but if you give him another one, he'll have 4. And then if you say something like, well, if he actually wins the AEW Championship, Don Callis and can do something like say, hey, Okada can do something like be like, hey, I have 4 belts. I can do whatever I want with them. That means I can give, the international title to like Josh Alexander or Hechicero, or I can retire the Continental Championship and I'll do something like say, hey, it's actually winning a tournament, like the winner of the Continental Championship Classic is going to face the champion at Revolution or something like that. Like he can kind of like do what Jim Cornette did in TNA Wrestling, where Vince Russo kind of had a lot of screwy stipulations and they needed somebody to have like this meeting with all the wrestlers on television to say, hey, we're going to unconvolute some things. You can kind of do that and set that up really. And then the other thing about as well, you don't want Okada 4 belts, and also if you have something where if he wins, you're going to change some stipulations and other things like that. Really, it may feel a little screwy, even if it leads your company in a better direction. And then the other thing that I will say is that does anybody believe Okada will beat Hangman? Because, it goes down to that argument. Do you want to see Okada 4 belts, or do you want to do something with Okada where you just change the rules a little bit? And then ultimately, too, Okada, he doesn't speak that much English. He says the word bitch a lot, really. So it's almost like, he kind of is almost like a meme. So it's almost like, do you want to have that person... do you want to really have that person be your champion? It's almost like Enzo Amore in WWE. Like Enzo Amore, he trash talks people, but he's never really shown that he could be a serious wrestler, do a serious promo. There's people like John Cena who can jump into comedy, and then there's people like, and he can be serious, but there's people like Enzo who can't. And then Okada, if he's saying the word bitch, and that's the only thing that gets him over, really, how's he going to cut a promo if they have a rematch at Full Gear? How's he going to have a promo with Takeshita if you want to do Okada and Okada and Hangman Part 2 at Full Gear, Takeshita and Okada for the AEW Championship. So how are you going to set that up? And then also they're having Full Gear in New Jersey. So that's the big New York crowd. So do you think Okada has the best English language skills? Do you think there will be really good promo? Do you think there will be a really good setup if you're going to have, if you make him the champion in St. Louis in October, and then you have something where he is the champion and defending his title in New Jersey, in New Jersey, where where that's part of the New York. It's not part of the New York area, but a lot of people say that because it's so close to New York, really. So I think that, Okada would be a controversial option. It would make some sense in some storytelling aspects, but there are 2 other options. Like number 1 would be MJF. The reason why, there's also Kenny Omega, but MJF would be the best option because MJF can cut a promo. You can do something like take the belt off of Hangman, and then they have another match at New Jersey, because that's also, like I said, MJF's part from Long Island, really. So obviously, he would be the hometown hero because it's in the tri-state area, and there's a lot of people who go from New York to New Jersey. So it would be, something that the fans would see. The other thing too is that they've had very long title reigns in AEW. You had MJF as a world champion for over a year. You had Jon Moxley, who was like the champion for 9 months. You have Mercedes as a TBS champion for 500 days. You have Okada as a continental champion for over 500 days, really. And you have Athena as a over 1,000-day champion. So sometimes what's good with professional wrestling is that you don't have a long title reign. Sometimes you have to hot potato the belt. And WWE has been really good with this. That I remember, like when John Cena had that injury, and when he was filming a movie, he was stripped of the title. I think they gave it to Rey Mysterio, and then they gave it to Randy Orton or somebody like that, and then it went from Triple H to Randy Orton. They switched the belt a few times, really. And one of the reasons why they do that is because sometimes you need to show that you need to break a pattern. It can't just be long title reign, long title reign, long title reign. This is not the 1980s where you go from Hogan for like 4 years to another Hogan reign to Macho Man for like a year or whatever, really. But you can't always have a long title reign, so it may be good to hot potato the belt a little bit. The other thing too is it would be good for him to be a champion, because the other thing, he still has that contract, and you need to have somebody win that title. You need to have somebody successfully cash in, because the other problem is that why would I want to have the Money in the Bank, the Feast or Fired in TNA Wrestling, the Option C in TNA Wrestling, where if you're the X Division champion, at the time of Destination X, you can give up your championship to challenge for the world title. Why would I have the Casino Gauntlet, which in AW, which means that if you get it, you get a contract shot at the champion. However, they changed the rule to week notice, really. But the other thing too is that you've had 2 unsuccessful cash-ins. Last year you had Christian Cage, and you convoluted that at Revolution. Then you had Athena. Now you're doing this with MJF, really. Where I do think that in a way, having him win would be good, because it'll say, hey, if you have this, you're going to win, really. You're not always going to lose, really. So it looks bad. So I think that MJF can do a lot of good, really. You can do something where he will get the New York crowd excited. You can do something where also in a way that you can make that contract mean something. And then the other thing that I'll say too is that MJF is going on a honeymoon. So if you say something like 1 or 2 weeks, he's traveling and having a good time with his wife, really, he still can come back. And this is also a good look for AEW in a sense, really, that it's not that if he was gone for like the rest of the year or whatever, that's bad, really. So you can kind of do something like show your audience and show everybody, hey, we have wrestlers that have some time off, and sometimes it's very short term. And we're going to save MJF for an ambush, really. And that's good, because it tells the audience, it tells everybody, hey, you know what? We're not going to do things like Darby Allin going to Mount Everest, which is necessarily a vacation. We're not going to do things like have somebody go away for like a year or whatever, really. So we're actually going to do something. So I think that MJF would be the right option for that. I think the other thing that's good about MJF is that's not the Don Callis family, because the problem is with Don Callis is that there's only 3 members of the Don Callis family that matters. One is Okada, the next one is Takeshita, and the other one is Kyle Fletcher, really. So Kyle Fletcher just lost. You can't have Okada because, like I said, you have Okada 4 belts. And then also, too, you have that thing where you can put a stipulation to divvy up his titles, really. And then also, too, the other thing is how well can Okada hold a promo to an American audience when he doesn't speak English that well. And then the other thing that's bad is Takeshita, because Takeshita may be leaving to New Japan Pro Wrestling. So, yeah, you can make him a double champion. And then the other thing, too, is that I've not seen Takeshita cut any English promos. I've not seen video packages. I've not seen any storytelling with this guy. So you cannot have a wrestler that can't do that. That was one of the reasons why the great Khali would have not made a good WWE Raw champion. You need to have wrestlers that can do all of that. And it's not necessarily racism. It's not necessarily prejudice or foreigner, but it's necessarily common sense, really. There's a reason why if the Iron Sheik could only speak, Middle Eastern or Arab or a foreign language, he would not be holding the champion for 4 years in WWE in that hypothetical, really. If Eddie Guerrero or Rey Mysterio could only speak Spanish, they would not be the champion in WWE that long during the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression eras. You have to have people who can, communicate and do well with an American audience. And if Takeshita does not have that, if Okada doesn't have that, and if the Don Callis, I don't, and Don Callis, like, having to speak for them is a little bad because he's kind of been in that role a little too long. Like, he's kind of been the kind of like Tweety thing where he speaks, people say, fuck you, Don Callis, and whatever, really. So it does become a little repetitive with that. I think another opponent should be Josh Alexander, but he loses way too much to have that, really. But I think that the other option, and I think one people will say, is Kenny Omega versus Adam Page. There's a lot of things there's a lot of things too. There's a story that they were tag team champions. The other thing too is that Kenny Omega has been injured. So this is kind of like maybe a little bit of a turn down in his career. Like, okay, I'm going to retire soon. Or, okay, you know what, I want a last hurrah, really. So, and for everything that he's done for the company, really, can we kind of just like give him like a last hurrah? I think that could be something really good. The other thing too is that even if you have Omega win, really, yes, Kenny Omega would be a good champion in the New York City crowd, so that can add something. And I also think too, as I said, really, that I'm not sure if he's injured. I think he was slightly injured, but the point of it, but he's doing some stuff in Japan, really, but he can easily come back and help out the company, really. And it's like what I also said with MJF, time off, but come back for a couple of months, be drafted for a couple of months. So you can do that with Kenny Omega. There are some problems with Kenny Omega, really. Like, if he's injured, you don't want him to become like a Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns when you go on stretch without defending the title, or he's not there, really. The other thing too with Kenny Omega is that again, it's also not a good look because he was in the Forbidden Door match, but he was not at Toronto, and that was bad because Kenny Omega is a Canadian wrestler, and then he could have had a match with anybody. He could have had him and Chris Jericho if he wanted to give Chris Jericho one more match, really, before he leaves, or you could have done like Kenny Omega versus Takeshita or somebody else. Like, he should have had a match at All Out, but if he was not available, then fuck him for that. If he's injured, I understand. If he's just wanting to take time off or do other projects, fuck him. The company needs him. But again, you're rewarding people who are out for too long. And one of the good things about Darby Allin, I'll say, is that he's not after the World Heavyweight title now because he doesn't deserve it. He last year with the retirement match with Sting, he was like the big star of the company. But ultimately, he got injured. That was the first thing. And then also, he really had his eyes on the prize of Mount Everest. When, honestly, if he was a real company man, really, he would be like, okay, you know what? I want to be the champion. I'm going to go after that. And we're going to save Swerve and Hangman a little bit more down the road, really. We're going to have Darby Allin, then maybe Hangman gets it back, or Jon Moxley. And then you have Jon Moxley, Hangman. Then you have Hangman versus Swerve, really. So, really, he kind of... One of the reasons why he had the Death Riders is because of Darby Allin not being the champion last year, when that was in a lot of talks, really. So again, him not being champion now, and more feuding with Jon Moxley is almost maybe a way of saying, you don't deserve to be the heavyweight title picture because you left when you were hot, really. And the next thing about it is with Kenny Omega, if you kind of say he's taking time off or the company needs him, now you're making him a champion, what message does that send to the fans and the roster? Oh, well, you know what, if you want to take time off, really, you become champion, so take all the time off that you want to, really, that's not good, really. So there's definitely, like, as I said, there's just a lot of really good, there's a lot of, like, credible options, really. But, it really comes down to, like, Okada, MJF, and Hangman. I think the best one right now would be MJF. And I know it's a little bit of repeat mode. And I would say, too, I would not mind them having a Texas death match or a hardcore match. Because when you have repeat matches, you have to do something different. So in Forbidden Door, they had a regular match. So it does not make sense for them to do a regular match. They have to add something. Make it a steel cage match. Make it a hardcore match. Make it a Texas death match, and I don't mind them just doing that because they kind of put themselves in this box really, and then at AEW Full Gear, you have to kind of like cut that back a little bit. I've kind of also said too, and I've said this before, that if I was booking Wrestle Dream, it would be Bryan Danielson and Darby Allin in a tag team against Jon Moxley and Daniel Garcia. That's the best direction, really. Or or Jon Moxley and Pac. I would have done that. And then what I would have also done is have either Okada and Hangman, or I would have done MJF and Hangman in a Texas death match, or a St. Louis death match, or something like that. So that way, you kind of have, one hardcore match per show, and then also you kind of show, a little bit of a, of a break of Jon Moxley and Darby Allin doing hardcore stuff, because they can't do that every pay-per-view, because you're going to run into a pattern of it being a little too repetitive. It becomes the Conway Twitty gag and Family Guy. But I think that with more thought and more analysis, a few of my commentators are correct. People who make comments in my videos, that I think the best option is MJF versus Hangman Adam Page at Wrestle Dream. And they just have to work hard on building new talents. You have Anthony Bowens. You can do something with the Acclaim, like you could make like the New Day, where they go after singles titles while being a tag team. You can do that with Brody King and Bandito, because I think Bandito deserves a shot at the championship, either on television. He's put in a lot of great work. There's also Bobby Lashley that you can do, like Bobby Lashley versus Hangman would be a very, very cool match. You could you could also do here. There's a few other options as well. Really, and it's going to take some time to think about. But they do have some people there that can do some shit and be a good champion. Some of it has to come down to better booking. Like I've said before, and I'll say it again: the biggest heel in AEW is the booking committee. So that's all I really gotta say, really. So I think that hopefully they pick the right champion. Hopefully they start building towards that, because if they don't, really, this is going to be a clusterfuck show. And just remember that I think last time I researched, they have 4,000 people at St. Louis for a pay-per-view. That's bad, because TNA Slammiversary had 8,000, so they need to get a lot more people there. I think Chia Fitz is 16,000 to 20,000 people. They can do it, but ultimately, does AEW give a fuck? And that's the issue with AEW. Do they give a fuck, or they don't give a fuck?